Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our next talk.
That's a wife?
Hello everyone, thank you for hanging in with us all the way to the 5 o'clock hour. This is Breaking Down Walls, How to Prepare Oneself for the Feedback Conversation. I'm Lauren Evans. I'm the Program Director at University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences.
And I'm Ethan Clement. I'm one of our PGY1s.
And we also have to thank Meryl Bolden. She is one of our faculty members. She could not travel because she is very pregnant. So she assisted with the talk, but couldn't be here to help us give it. We do not have any disclosures, unfortunately.
But we do have some objectives today. So the things that we want to talk about with you guys is about your wiring and temperament, your kind of innate self, and how that kind of plays into what type of feedback you need and receive. Then we want to talk about different strategies that we can develop, how we can dismantle some of our disorientations to help not only give, but receive feedback. And then the last thing that we want to do is talk about the growth mindset in the kind of the context of feedback and what that looks like.
So I always love this graphic when thinking about feedback because there's so much under the surface. It's not just the words that someone is telling you, it is the mindset of the person receiving the feedback. It's the emotions, the history, their wiring and temperament to start with, the timing of it. All of those play a major factor in how someone receives feedback. And while some of it we can't really change, there are techniques that we can use to assist with receiving feedback.
And while this talk is based on research from across the world of feedback, we did rely pretty heavily on one specific book. And this is Thanks for the Feedback by Douglas Stone and Sheila Henn. They're not only law professors at Harvard, they have also co-founded a company called the Triad Group, which helps companies like Johnson & Johnson, Honda, the White House, help their employees get and receive feedback.
So the first place we're going to start is wiring and temperament. There are some things that you can't change, right? Like who you are, those are things that are not necessarily going to completely change what you're wiring, how you're built, and those are things that shouldn't change. But they are important when thinking about how you receive feedback.
Yeah. So the first one of these is your baseline. So where do you kind of sit on an everyday basis? Are you kind of the proverbial pout fish, you know, for anybody that has kids in here? Or are you the Grinch? Or actually, do you more align yourself with Russell from Pixar up? Are you kind of the always optimist?
And so from there, from your baseline, whenever you receive feedback, you're going to have a swing. So that swing can be really big. You know, it can be a really deep negative swing. Or it can be barely moving off your baseline and you're pretty unbothered by feedback and maybe you receive it but you aren't as bothered by the negative feedback or aren't as affected by the positive feedback. It can really go in either direction.
And the last one of these is your sustain and recovery. Essentially it boils down to the duration that a feedback will affect you. So are you somebody that can receive some feedback, positive or negative, and then you go back to your baseline pretty quickly, or are you someone that's kind of still perseverating because someone told you to drop your angle on your art line 4 weeks ago? So we're actually going to go into first thing is simulated feedback. I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here. Now you can see this is not me. This is Dr. Fournette. She's one of my co-interns this year, and she is dealing with a very difficult airway. That's what we're going to be talking about. So the case that we're going to talk about is one that I had pretty early on in my intern year. This is something, it's the standard like, oh crap case where you have an obese 500-pound lady that got found down, that's super hypertensive, that has a GCS of 3, that they bagged all the way in, and now she's vomited everywhere, and she's continuing to vomit everywhere. And oh, by the way, our airway part wasn't stocked that morning. So I tried intubating this lady twice direct. It goes poorly. And so my attending has to come behind me and do it. So let's actually listen into the feedback session for this case.
Hey Ethan, we just came out of that case. Are you ready for feedback?
That case sucked. That was a terrible case. I don't want to have this feedback right now with her. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, we had an airway sense today. 5 minutes, that was not 5 minutes that it took for her to get in here. I don't know that I can do this. I'm technically going to be bad. Like, this now aligns with my ITE scores. I don't think this is going to go well. Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. So I noticed the airway cart wasn't fully stocked when we got there, and that probably made things more challenging.
Yeah, it actually did make things challenging. I really wish they would have just stocked the airway cart before we got in today.
Okay, but I mean, we can always check whenever we get that heads up is probably the first thing we can go do.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed, so when you inserted your blade, I think you went just a little too deep. That really changed your visualization, and once we realized all that vomit, we could have probably set up a second suction, and maybe that would have helped with your visualization too.
She hates me. She's my PD, and this is awful, and she's never gonna like me again. I don't want to come back, and I am probably the shame of the residency at this point. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, good. You'll get it next time.
No, I won't. Yeah, I hope so.
So, as you can see, that didn't go right? That didn't go very well. Ethan didn't receive the feedback. She really took none of the feedback that I was trying to give her away from that session, and I didn't give her really a great chance at success either. Walking out of a failed airway to say, let's immediately do feedback, I probably didn't set her up for success. But we can learn some different techniques that can really help for next time and for a better feedback experience in the future.
So we're going to talk about some distortions and things that you can change that come off of your wiring and temperament. And the very first one of those is being prepared and being mindful. So what does this mean? This means understanding how you actually receive feedback. It kind of goes back to the amygdala, the fight or flight response. How do you innately as a person deal with that? Are you someone that blames others like I did because someone should have stocked the airway card? Obviously not me. It would have gone great if I had, a video instead of having to direct this 500-pound lady. Or do you cry? Do you disassociate? Or do you just simply nod and say, okay, and then you actually never plan to go back and integrate that feedback yourself? So it's very important for you to be able, next time that you have feedback, whether you're a resident or you're an attending or you're anywhere in between in your learning or career, that you really listen to yourself and look at yourself and how you have that feedback and take it, and then you can change it.
So the next technique that we'll talk about is separating the strands. And so really that means you're taking some of the emotion out of it. You're separating that emotion from that true feedback that you're getting of, maybe there's a lot of emotion built into this because Ethan's last airway was something that didn't go right. And so there's more emotion than would be a typical response to this kind of feedback. Or, maybe there's something way deeper and back there that I don't know about, but that taking that emotion away can really help to focus on just the specific feedback and what the feedback was.
The third thing that we want to talk about is containing the story. So just because you're receiving or you're giving the feedback, the person that you're giving the feedback to should understand that feedback is in that moment. It has no bearing on who you were before the feedback or before the incident that required the feedback. And it also has no bearing on your potential in the future. We have a tendency to be able to take very specific instances and play it into the story of who we are. But if we can separate ourselves from that, contain the story into what is happening right now, and take the factual things that we're being given feedback about, assess them on our own, say this is something that I know that I need to change, then what you're able to do is you're able to get rid of the noise of the entire event.
And next step, so there's 5 total steps here, but next step is to change your vantage point a little bit. Change how you're looking at this feedback, change what bias maybe is in this feedback for you. If you went and told your very best friend, this is the feedback that I got, do you expect that they're going to tell you, you're the worst doctor ever, like you absolutely shouldn't do this anymore, you should be out of residency, or are they going to be able to focus just simply on that message?
And the very last one is my least favorite. It's the hardest for especially me to deal with, and that is that you have to accept the fact that you can't change how other people view you. So if I'm having this bad airway and I'm having to talk to my PD and I think she hates me, I can't change the way that I talk to her about that feedback. I can't change the way that I see myself in that feedback space relating to how she views me. When you separate yourself from how someone else may view you, especially the person that's giving you feedback, if that becomes less of the thing that you're anchoring yourself on, and you anchor yourself more on an internal view of yourself. How do I view me? How do I think I need to do this better next time? Then what you're doing is you're freeing yourself from outside perspective, and you're able to gauge internally what you need to do.
So our last case didn't go very well. We didn't have great feedback experience, so we're gonna try this again, but this time we're gonna use some of these techniques and see how it results.
That was really hard. That was an extremely hard case. That airway wasn't stopped. That was like one of the first times I did it. That was so difficult. I wonder if Dr. Evans will let me just take a second to think about this. Hey, Dr. Evans, I know we need to talk about that intubation that just happened. Do you mind if I just take a minute and I'll come to you when I'm ready to talk about it?
Yeah, of course. Just let me know when you're ready to debrief.
Hey, Dr. Evans, I'm ready to now talk about that feedback. I know there's some things that we probably need to change. What do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really hard case, right? I noticed that we weren't completely stocked up whenever we got in there, and that probably made things a little more challenging.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if we're being completely honest, that was really overwhelming for me. I know for a fact that I kind of lost track of time, and yeah, I didn't really even consider that I needed to come in and stock that cart beforehand, but I think that was embarrassing enough for me that I think that might be something that I do in the future.
And maybe we can go in and check together the next time that something like this comes in. The other thing I noticed was, a few little technique things. I think you advanced your blade a little far to get the visualization that you needed, and then maybe 2 suctions would have helped.
Oh man, here we go. My PD doesn't like me. That's not going to be great on my CCC meeting. You know what? I'm thinking about what she thinks about me. I think that she's just trying to give me some technical advice. Let's just focus on that. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, you'll get it next time.
Sure will.
So we see this went a little better. There was a little bit of some of this growth mindset there. She took some time, right? Like we all know everything is freshest when you're walking out of the trauma bay, out of the resuscitation. But maybe it's not the right time for you to accept that feedback. And so, she just told me point blank, I'm not ready for that. Like, give me a little bit of time. And then she was able to get herself in a better, mental space, and she was able to separate out that feedback from what she had previously felt it to be. And so you can really have either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And you don't always, one person isn't set in a fixed mindset for everything, and one person doesn't have a growth mindset for everything. You can think you are the very best airway expert that there's ever been, or you can think you're the very worst airway. You're never going to get the airway. You're always going to have problems. And if you aren't able to take the feedback one way or another, you're going to stay in that fixed mindset. Versus the growth mindset, which I wish I had a better just like tip of here's how to do it, but unfortunately I don't. But thinking about, I think I'm pretty good at airways. I get most of my airways, and so, but it's really helpful to have this extra tip, to have this extra feedback to assist me, or I know I'll get better at airways in the future with this feedback that I'm receiving.
And sometimes being able to get rid of some of these distortions allows, again, for you to clear up the picture or clear up the story. Especially as a resident yourself, kind of transitioning yourself into a growth mindset makes you walk into some of those failures, some of those feedback conversations with a light that's a little different than if it's fixed. Instead of, I will never be, or this did not go well, it's, I have the opportunity now to learn. I have the opportunity to tweak. I have the opportunity to become better. And it doesn't mean that everything that happened today will happen again, but it means next time I won't do this thing, I won't do that thing.
So she has perfected her airway skills. She has a growth mindset. And so now our intern, Marcel, is very excited with her skill set. So just a few take-home points. Really, feedback impact is going to be affected by an individual's response curve and where they are with that wiring and temperament, how much they swing off the baseline, and what the duration is. But you can implement some strategies to help you to better receive feedback and better take the message that was being communicated away, whether it was delivered in the best way or whether it was delivered in a really poor way. And the last thing is really growth mindset is incredibly crucial for feedback and learning. And so having that consideration that there are ways that I can improve is going to be the #1 way to improve taking feedback and receiving feedback.
And speaking of integrating things, here's our intern class this year. I thought I'd throw this picture in. This is our wilderness day that we had at a park that kind of overlooks the Little Rock itself. Beautiful place if you guys have never been to Little Rock. It's actually really nice. So anyway, thank you so much, and we hope that you kind of can glean some information from our talk.
Our resources, and if there's any questions that you want to email us, please feel free. But we'll take questions if anyone has any.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
So I guess the talk was like aimed at the learner and how they can change their mindset and framework to better receive feedback. Is there anything that you guys recommend that the person giving feedback are there phrases or strategies they can use to help the learner kind of receive it better?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is such a broad field of study on its own of how to give the appropriate feedback. I think some of it is, someone knowing that they're receiving feedback and preparing them for the feedback, giving them a comfortable space. Like in the first case, whenever I'm grabbing Ethan as we're walking out of a bay, and I'm sure there's people in and out, that's probably not the right spot. But outside of that, there is a lot of that study that goes into it, and I just don't know that I could exactly kind of narrow it down into a quick response.
Yeah, there's some techniques that our institution actually uses that I've had used on me that I find effective. One is they let me come to them. A lot of the times, and they encourage this, is we have a very big feedback culture. We set up initially, what are some things that we want to have feedback on? We set expectations at the beginning of the shift, and typically we try to talk to our attendees at the beginning, this is exactly what I'm working on. Please look at this aspect and help me with this aspect today. And then there's a lot of times that we have a conversation, especially with Dr. Bolden, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, that she likes to know how people like to take feedback. So a lot of the times the conversation is in the beginning, do you want the feedback now? Do you want to have it as an email? How do you want this feedback? And they provide us multiple ways for that to happen. Dr. Evans has multiple times pulled me after the shift kind of around the corner. She goes, what do you think went well about today? And that opens up a conversation for me to say, well, I think I did this, this, and this. And then I can get redirected onto, well, here's what I saw. Here's the things that I think need to, you could change. And it allows for more of an open conversation. And it also has, at our program, we have an entire area that feedback is important and specific to said person.
Any other questions we can answer? Thank you all.